50 years later, I'm back to do what I always swore I'd do, and that is to stand on the high ground and plant the American flag in North Vietnam. I'm doing it for all the guys that didn't come back. That's what this whole trip is all about. It really wasn't about me. This trip was about honoring those that served and that continue to serve on this hallowed ground. I haven't been back to Vietnam in 40-some years. I was here in 1969 initially, and I watched a lot of things occur over the next few years during that period of time. And so now I'm back. What's interesting, when I looked out the window of the aircraft and saw the first of what I would call Vietnam, the best way I know to explain it is a great melancholy kind of came over me. As I thought about all the events that occurred to me in Vietnam, in a general sense. And in particular, I thought about those who came with me and didn't return. I remember there was 36 of us that went through training together at Fort Bragg. And at the end of the first year that I was here, there were 20 of us left. And when I left at the end of the second year, there were 8 of us left. And let me mention something that I need to point out here. While some of my fellow soldiers that I went through training with gave their lives for this cause, a lot more Vietnamese and Montagnard people gave their lives. The life of the city doesn't appear to have changed really that much. It's the same Saigon, Ho Chi Minh city that I knew before. The people are the same people. The friendly folks that I knew are still here. When I explained to one of the ladies flying in tonight that I had been here in 1969 and 1970 and 71 through some of the war years, and she said, "Welcome back." She said, "I was born in 1973," and she said, "I hope you have a pleasant trip. I hope you have a pleasant journey back in time." And I thought that was really kind of cool of her to say. And the other lady kind of echoed and addressed specifically, she said, "I don't like the name Ho Chi Minh. I like Saigon. This city will always be Saigon to me, and probably for me, personally, it will always be Saigon also." While it's totally different, the landscape has changed, the culture has not changed. The people are still here, and I look forward to every aspect of it. The Caravelle, I mean, that was kind of the touchstone. That was the cool touchstone. It was the classy place to be in Saigon in 1969 and 1970. It was home to a lot of expats, and there were journalists here, there were diplomats here, and as a young E5, I thought it'd be really cool to go hang out with some of those bastards. And it was. I even went and bought some clothes down, I don't know where it was I bought them, so that I could come here. Because you didn't come here in t-shirts and stuff. You came here in nice clothes, what would be considered dress in this area. And you never knew who you were going to see here. I don't remember seeing anybody in particular, but I saw people that I thought, gee, that must be a pretty important person, because everybody was sucking up to them. They either had lots of money or they had class, I don't know. And it was a touchstone place, but everybody that came here said, oh yeah, I've been to the Caravelle, the Sportif bar, and hung out on the rooftop. That's cool. The one thing that keeps hitting me here was the time that I came down here. My old commander from THUOT was working here at MACV SOG at that time, and I came down to get debriefed. And Gene asked me, he said, hey, Sid, are you doing anything tonight? And I'm like, dude, I just came from THUOT. This is Saigon. What do you think? I just got here. I'm not doing anything tonight. And he said, I've been dating this girl. And I said, okay. He said, she has a sister. Oh, really? And come on, Saigon, what is this all about? And he said, no. He said, they're very classy, and they were. They're two classy ladies. They showed up in there, because the bar girls here were wearing, short skirts and all that stuff, and go-go boots, and the standard 1960s stuff that was going on in the States. These two girls showed up in their normal Audis, the local costume. Very pretty, very willowy, very slim. And I remember the girl I was with had on these white pants and kind of a light blue top. Just very pretty. And so we went to dinner, and we had a great time. We came to the Caravelle for drinks after dinner. So we got ready to leave, and Gene took the girl back to his place, and then this girl said, well, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm staying at House 10, which was a safe house that we have here in town. And she said, well, it's almost curfew. We need to get off the streets. You can come to my parents' house, because that's where I live with my parents. Okay, sure. And so we go to her parents' house. Very nice people, very welcoming, as most Vietnamese are. You can tell real quick if they're sincere or not. And these people were very sincere. And so I spent the night out on this patio that was screened in. It was a balcony, 2 or 3 floors up. And in the middle of the night, all of a sudden I hear these people, these footsteps running across the roof. And I'm, holy cow, so I pull a pistol, I got a pistol. And I'm getting ready. I didn't know what it was. And the girl slides in and she said, it's okay. And I said, what is that? And she said, it's Viet Cong. And I said, Viet Cong running across the roofs? And she said, they won't hurt us. They're okay. They're just going from one place to another. Swell. Yeah, the rooftop freeway, and that's how they moved. They moved across roofs then, because the roofs weren't as noticeable as they are now. Everything was much more level. So they could run blocks on roofs and then run across cables and then keep going. And so it was like, damn, and that was almost a surreal moment. But I keep thinking about that. That happened right here in Saigon. And there I was with a 45. These guys are running around with AK-47s or whatever it might be. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm not gonna go to war with these guys. Yeah, this ain't gonna happen. So I think about that. I think about a lot of memories, but that one kind of keeps coming back to me. It was a good memory, because that's the key. As you get older, the good memories come out and the bad memories go back in that box. And that's how I deal with it. We're in Saigon, and we're giving it one more shot to see if we can find House 10. House 10 was a house that was originally procured by the Central Intelligence Agency in the late 50s or early 60s, and was used by MACV SOG headquarters for people moving in and out of the city that came in from the various locations. An example was I came from THUOT several times to be debriefed specifically by people at the headquarters. So we're going to go try to see if we can find the location and see if it still exists in any form whatsoever, and go back to a little piece of history for me and where I came from. The house was a large villa-style house with a compound. There were buildings out back that housed equipment. And in the early days, they supplied a lot of the special teams that were operating with sanitized equipment. Because of where we were going, they didn't want anybody to pick up immediately on who we were or what we were doing. And so we're going to look for it one more time. It had some great bedrooms, had its own bar, had its own little grill. You could get a hamburger or pho or whatever you wanted for the day to start your day off right, or in the evening. And then they had contacts throughout the city for restaurants and things like that. So while it wasn't a fun place necessarily, it wasn't procured to be a fun place. It could almost be a little in-country R&R or rest and relaxation site if you were coming in from one of the command and control detachments or one of the special organizations that operated throughout Vietnam. It was kind of a sea of tranquility at that time, because you can see the streets here are the old French-style streets with all the trees and the greenery and stuff, and the area out around House 10 was a very calm area. And so you could really let down your guard, chill, have a few beers and not worry about anything happening. Get some good food, French food, whatever. And so it worked really good. It was a great place to come.
Is that it?
Looks like it.
Yeah.
It's like I say, throughout your life you have to reinvent yourself. So House 10 has probably reinvented itself 100 times since the war. But this is it. They've torn down some of the walls of the old compound. And of course they've added new car maintenance facilities and whatever, or converted. But it's interesting to see, and I believe we have finally found it. This is pretty cool. The tree-lined street in front, automatically, as soon as we started driving down the street and looking at the trees they were much smaller then, but they were still green and pretty, and it's just it was a very calm area at the time. And actually standing here right now, even with all that's going on outside that compound, it feels very calm inside too. There's an air about it. Kind of a funny feeling inside to be here. Pretty emotional, I guess. When you go back and find a piece of your history, as little as it was for me here, it's pretty moving, and I'll treasure this. The backbone and core of an SF team are the non-commissioned officers, and some really great ones passed through here. Some of them didn't make it, some of them did. Good people. Another circle closed.
Yeah, another circle closed.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. I really didn't think we were going to find this. That is so cool.
That's pretty cool.
I'll be damned. When did we leave Saigon? 2 days ago. Today's day number 3. My ass is permanently attached to the seat of this car. Out of Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City, and up QL14 through Gia, and then into Ban Me Tuot. It was kind of a journey back for me because while I hadn't driven the roads before, I was seeing the sights and the sounds and the smells and the feelings that I knew 48 years ago when we came here, when I came here the first time. When it really hit me and things became real, if you will, was yesterday between Ban Me Tuot and THUOT, that as we moved through the mountains and I saw the clouds swirling through the valleys of the jungle. That really took me back to where I had been, what I'd been through, and it really brought into focus that, yeah, I'm in Vietnam. This is the Central Highlands that I remember. And you can see the clouds down in the valley there a little bit, and maybe some more up there. Kind of a spooky thing. Yeah, the clouds spook me. The clouds to this day spook me. You couldn't get me to walk through those clouds down there in that little valley, that little swale that's down there. About the third mission that I was on, we were moving around the edge of a hill, and we walked out of a cloud, and the Viet Cong walked out of the cloud, and then we're sitting there looking at each other, and it was just an instant, and it became an instant contact. We started shooting each other, and we broke contact and moved away after we inflicted some casualties, but it was like it was just a very spooky situation with the clouds swirling around, and then gunfire and grenades going off, and the smoke and the fog of battle, if you will, gets to you. And to this day, that's still kind of spooky to me, a little unsettling, because it just happened so quickly, and it happened out of what I would term a beautiful setting initially to start with, because actually the jungle and all is very pretty, and then it just turns to something else immediately. I get this tightness, I get this tension, I get, I can feel it running up my neck, and it's just, it's spooky. Best way I know to explain it. Great technical words. It's fucking spooky. Yeah, okay. But it's spooky. I had always thought and still think that the jungle is very, very pretty. That it's a great place to visit and a great thing to see and a great thing to enjoy, but it is a terrible place to fight a war. We're in the southern part of the Central Highlands. We're just outside Gia. We're about 2 hours south of Ban Me Tuot. That's where I was stationed. I did conduct some operations at Gia to reinforce a special forces camp there at one point. As you look out over the area and you see the jungle and how beautiful the jungle looks, or at least I think the jungle's beautiful, and how peaceful it is. And then you start into the jungle, and it's really interesting. You get more smells of the rotting foliage that has fallen off the trees, and new growth has already started. It's very quiet and very calm, but you do start to get this feeling in your gut that at any minute somebody's going to start shooting or throwing grenades or doing something, and 9 times out of 10 it did. And so it was just, you brought yourself up on edge and stayed there the entire time. All of those smells coming together, the rotting foliage, the newly disturbed soil, the fires that are burning, and the moistness of the climate, it just kind of created the feeling and the smell that I have right now. It's really strange that all of a sudden I'm back, but I know I'm here. I'm kind of pushing it down. I know that we're not in a war zone here. I know that nobody's going to attack us, or at least I hope not. but it's like I want to go back to that. It's like a conditioned response almost. That, oh my gosh, you know, here it is. We're going out. We're walking up the trail. When's the shit going to happen? And then you just learn to push that down and say, no, it's not going to happen, and try to enjoy it, and I do enjoy it. But it's a little, that adds to the surrealism, because I'm waiting for something to happen that I know is not going to happen. I mean, it did for 2 years while I was here. It happened all the time. And I'm kind of waiting for that now. I'm waiting for somebody to jump out in the road as we're driving along with an AK, and I'm thinking, okay, what are you going to do when that happens? And it's like, no. You know, this is 2017, it's 48 years or so since I first came to Vietnam, and that's not going to happen. And my intellectual side understands that. My emotional side says, get ready, the shit's going to happen. And it's juxtaposing those two together and creating that calmness that says, okay, just push it down, you're okay. I can't believe that I'm back here, that we're doing this, that we're making this trip, this adventure, and this, damn, it sounds kind of stupid, but this pilgrimage back to some place I had been before, kind of like the Crusaders going to Jerusalem or something. Well, I'm back here to see what's changed, and there's been tremendous change, and yet at the same time, it's still Vietnam. It's the Vietnam that I remember. Okay, so I'd been out on an operation. Probably I'd been out for 12, 14 days, and I came back to our camp in THUOT. And whenever you came back off of an operation or a mission, you got a free beer at the club, which was a cool thing. So I went in, I was still camoed up, or somewhat camoed up, because the camo rubs off and stuff. And I walked in and ordered a beer, and I'm sitting there drinking a beer. And all of a sudden this person walks up to me and grabs my head and sticks her tongue down my ear and says, "You sweet motherfucker." And it was Martha Raye, who was a well-known comedian at the time in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And she was actually a nurse in the Army Reserve. She was a lieutenant colonel. And so she sat down with me, and she's drinking straight vodka. And so I drank a beer, and she drank the vodka, and she told me, she said, "Hey, look, you know, I've got a house and a housekeeper in Beverly Hills. She said, I've told everybody else that I've run into, and you're one of my boys. If you ever need a place to stay, you can stay at my team house in Beverly Hills," or wherever it was, Brentwood, or wherever it was she lived. And she said, "You can have all the food you want, you can have all the drink you want, you can stay as long as you want, and if I run into any good-looking starlets, I'll try to hook you up." And shit, what more could I ask for? That's pretty cool. And a day or two later, she was still in our camp. She was staying in our camp with us. Everybody started passing the word that they lost Maggie, Martha Raye. Everybody called her Maggie. They said they'd lost her. And they started checking around, and Giania, the A camp that was here in this vicinity, was under siege. And they were taking some pretty heavy casualties. And so Martha Raye just jumped on a helicopter that was coming down here to bring supplies, medical supplies, and she came down to help. And this is where she was. And of course, everybody got all upset about that, because she was kind of a celebrity type person, even though she was really a nurse, and she was doing a hell of a job down here at Giania. So at that time, they loaded up my team and another team and a platoon from one of the exploitation companies at THUOT, and flew us in to reinforce the camp for a short period of time. And by the time we got here, most everything was already over with, but we rescued Martha Raye, I guess. You know, we like to tell everybody we rescued Martha Raye, but she was just fine. And she was being one hell of a professional nurse and one hell of a person. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. Unfortunately, not too many years later, I went to her funeral at Fort Bragg. She asked to be buried at the post cemetery at Fort Bragg with all of her boys. And she was. She was somebody that really meant a lot to all of us. And she was a very neat lady. And even though she was a woman, she was part of the brotherhood because she was an honorary Green Beret. We gave her a Green Beret officially and all that stuff. And she wore it till the day she died, and it went on top of her casket. Wow, didn't know it hit me that hard. She was a great person. She had an interesting life. And I mean, she knew all the stars of Hollywood at that time, which was cool. I never saw her again after that in life. But it's strange where you run into people and the attachments you make in such a small world as special operations. I don't have the words. I wish I was a hell of a lot smarter and could really explain it better, because all I can say is I feel like I'm back where I should be. I came to THUOT in April of 1969 on my first tour in Vietnam. And when I arrived in Cam Ranh Bay, they transloaded us and sent us up to 5th Special Group headquarters at Nha Trang, which is again still on the coast. And at that point, they asked for volunteers for a special project. And we really didn't know what it was, but not all of my class chose to, but many did. And so we chose to volunteer. Again, you're always cautioned, don't volunteer for anything in the Army, but I'd already volunteered for the Airborne, I'd volunteered for Special Forces. I thought, what the hell, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's volunteer for all this shit. So I volunteered for that, and they sent me up here. So I got here in probably early April, 69, something like that. And at that time, the compound was, as best I can tell at this point, probably 1,000, maybe 1,500 meters to my right is where the actual compound was, because we were off the end of the runway, and the runway stretches behind us here. And it was called CCS or B-50, B being a designation for a lieutenant colonel type command in special operations. Or they called it Command and Control Detachment South. In Kontum, which is north of here, was Command and Control Detachment Central, and in Da Nang was Command and Control Detachment North, CCN. It certainly looks different than it did when I was here, because when I was here, all it was a galvanized shed and some boards stuck up, and that was East Field. And the only thing that landed here were C-123s, C-130s, and DC-3s for Vietnam Airlines, because that's all they had at the time. And the DC-3s would be loaded with Vietnamese people, goats, chickens, whatever else they wanted to carry with them from one part of the country to another. So it was a very primitive airfield at that time. Now it's kind of like a regional airport that I'd see in Fayetteville, North Carolina. The hill that's in the off distance there is where we had a radio relay site, and I was on top of it that one night, and it was a very nice, calm, quiet, cool night. And I was looking down at camp, which would be to my rear right now, and all of a sudden along the eastern border, it was just all lit up with these little orange puffs that were really pretty, and I thought it was really kind of cool looking, like 4th of July shit, except it was mortar rounds that were impacting the camp as a Viet Cong, North Vietnamese, whoever it was, decided to probe the camp and see what they could do. I could look down and I could see them firing their mortars, and then I could watch and then see the mortars impacting along the edge of the camp. And so I called our gun section in camp, the big mortars, and they fired back at them, and then the helicopter showed up and they started their firing, and we just had a wonderful time. Okay, so I had a guy, I won't say the unit or the guy, but he was a new SF guy, brand new here, and when the helicopters got up, we had to, of course, shut off the gun section downtown, because we didn't want you can't have gunships and mortars or artillery falling in the same area. because they might run into each other, and you don't want that to happen. And so I called the gun section, turned them off, and while I did, the helicopters called, and they were talking to this other American that was up there with me, and they said, "Can you mark your position?" So he said, "Yeah." So he took a flare and fired off a flare, and now all of a sudden the top of the mountain is nothing but bright, brilliant light, and we're right in the middle of this shit. And I'm like, holy fuck, dude, what did you just do? And the helicopter guys called back and they said, that isn't exactly what we meant. So I grabbed a helmet real quick and put a helmet over the flare and shut that down, and then turned on an IR strobe. And then they picked up that IR or infrared strobe and brought their guns in to bear, and they fired pretty darn close to us, but they knew exactly where we were at that point. I mean, how can you help it? We'd lit the fucking world up. So the helicopters said, okay, we got you, we know where you are, and we'll make our runs and we won't hit you. But it worked out just fine, and we drove them off into the night. And I threw a few rounds down at them with an M79, so just, we wanted to say we fought back. All of our operations were conducted across the fence, we called it, in Cambodia, and most of ours were in Cambodia and Laos, and then we did a couple of missions up in North Vietnam for CCN when they started running out of teams, because there was a large loss of teams through all the CNC detachments, command and control detachments, south, central, and north. It was a high rate. I think everybody that left here in one piece and left those behind that didn't, maybe feels a little bit guilty. And yet we did our job. So it's kind of the yin and the yang of things. It's the good and the bad. It's both sides of the coin. So I'm glad I made it out, but I'm sorry I left folks behind. This is pretty amazing. Each day has become more and more real, and I think today's the most real of all, because it's back, and you know I'm touching this earth, and I give thanks that I'm here and in one piece. I'm sorry that some of the other guys aren't, but it was something that we all chose to do, and we all knew the risks and the opportunities. And I was afforded a lot of opportunities, and other guys gave their lives for me to have those opportunities. And they're my brothers. And my hat's off to them. So this was the B team headquarters, B-23, that controlled all the A teams that were west of here along the Cambodian-Vietnamese border. We would interact with them from our camp, which was out at East Field, which is to my left, a considerable distance, but not too awfully far. But we'd interact with them because they had supplies, they had advanced medical equipment and personnel that we didn't have. And they had the little PX and the liquor store where we could buy cigarettes and booze. And so that was very important to be able to resupply ourselves with those kinds of things. And they did some administrative stuff for us, but not very much, because B-23 was not a part of MACV SOG. But since we were all SF, Special Forces, we tended to work together anyway. I've always been a fan of history, and Teddy Roosevelt came here, I'm not sure when, I would say probably in the 20s or 30s perhaps, to hunt tigers, because there are tigers, or there were tigers in the forest here. And so he came here to hunt tigers. And I'd heard that, I read about it, and I'd heard people talk about it. And at that time, this building was a lodge, if you will, where visiting dignitaries would stay. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt being Teddy Roosevelt, this is where he stayed. And then he went out from here into the jungles to hunt tigers. When I was here, from time to time, we would go out in the local area around Ban Me Thuot just for a 2 or 3 day training mission, just to kind of pump ourselves up and keep our skills in certain areas. And to support our own camp defense, because we had to defend ourselves. And so one night I got sent out on an OP-LP ambush. And we went out and we set up on a trail, and nothing happened. It was quiet. And then all of a sudden the next morning we started rolling up and getting ready to walk back into camp because we were probably 4 or 5 kilometers out of camp. We got up and my interpreter came back, and I was talking to him. I got everybody. He said, yeah. He said, we see tigre. And I said, what? And he said, tigre. And we're talking very quietly because we're a small group, and when you're in the woods with a small group, you don't talk loud. I'm getting a little frustrated with him. And I said, tigre. I said, look, Took. His name was Took me. I said, Took. I said, we pay you 7,000 piastres extra a month to speak English. What are you saying? He said, tigre. Arr. Oh, you mean tiger? Well, yeah, that's what, in essence, yeah, that's what I'm saying, you stupid American. Tigre. Okay. So we quietly moved down to the end of the site, because I'd been up at the head of the ambush, the position we had. I went down to the end of the site, and I could look along this large trail or road, if you want to call it that. And there was on the far side, there was a meadow. And I remember the grass was probably 2 feet high, something like that. And there was dew. You could see the droplets of dew on the grass. And sitting in the middle of that with a shaft of light on it was a mother tiger and her cub, just in their natural habitat. And it struck me, having remembered about Teddy Roosevelt and hunting tigers, and I thought, the last thing in the world that I want to do is kill that tiger. I just want to look at her and enjoy it. And it was one of the most beautiful sights I remember seeing when I was in Vietnam. Those peoples are much like, I equate them to the American Indian, or perhaps to the Aborigines of Australia. They're a people that are unto themselves, their own society, their own mores, and they live life the way they choose to live. It's different than us. Doesn't mean it's any better or any worse. It's just different. And so they formed these tribes that moved into the central highlands of Vietnam, and they had the Rades, which were the aristocrat society. They had the Gerais that were the warriors. They had the Manongs that were the farmers and the tradespeople. And so they had their own society that developed, and they operated totally separate from the Vietnamese, and they had serious clashes with the Vietnamese. At one point they had gotten, with outside help, to the point that they built a university just for Montagnards here in Ban My Thuot. And the Vietnamese army came in and destroyed that university and burnt all the books, and much was lost to the world about the history of the Montagnards when that happened, because there had been people here doing work on that over a period of time. And so as we came in, the American military, and particularly special operations or special forces, we began to work with the Montagnards, because they were the ones that knew the terrain the best of the areas that we were most concerned with, the border areas of Vietnam. And we began to support them. We found out that they had a secret army of their own called Phu Ro, and Phu Ro was manned and maintained strictly by the Montagnards. The Vietnamese were very against it, so it was a very secret and quiet society. And so we began to support them, and we provided them with arms and ammunition and claymore mines to protect their villages, basically for self-defense of the Montagnard people. And because of that, we formed a lasting and trusting friendship and a working relationship with them, where they supported us in the efforts that we were trying to do here to support the military efforts of America in Southeast Asia. Because we didn't judge them. And I think that was the key. The Vietnamese, be they north, south, or wherever, they would judge them. They called them children. And as a Montagnard, to be called a child, they love children, but for a man to be called a child is great disrespect. We came in an accepting mode. because that's what we do. We come in and we work with people, and we understand that they're not going to be just like us. They're going to be different. They're going to have their own religion. They're going to have their own society. And we accept that and learn to work with it as opposed to trying to destroy it or change it. Our mission was to conduct cross-border reconnaissance operations in Cambodia, Laos, and North Vietnam so that the Americans would know what was coming towards them, because the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through those areas. And so they would move large quantities of people and equipment down those trails, and if we were there watching the trails and watching the unit movements, we could then tell the commanders in Vietnam, and they could position forces to counter those enemy that were coming down the trail. And so for us to get to those locations and to get there efficiently, quietly, and effectively, we got the Montagnards to work with us and on these small reconnaissance operation of 2 Americans and 4 Montagnards, 6-man teams to go into those areas. And they're the ones that we were inserted by helicopter, but then they got us to the actual point of the mission. One of the things that always struck me was when I came here on my first tour, I knew I was here for 12 months, because a tour here was 12 months. These guys' tour was a lifetime tour. And so I knew that I could learn a lot from them. But at the same time, I had some skills and some knowledge that I could teach them. And so I think we came to a very quick mutual understanding, them having understood and worked with other Americans in the special operations community. They understood that they could learn things from us, but they also understood that they could teach us things. And so it was kind of a synergistic relationship that we had with those guys, or that I had with them, because they would teach me things about the jungle, about the terrain, about the peoples, about the language, about cooking in the jungle and working with all the various things. They taught me how to live in the jungle, and I taught them some military things that were very helpful tactically and so on. The whole point behind Special Forces going to war or going into an area and working with indigenous forces, that's what it's all about. Learning how to live with the locals. So you go in and you figure out who's who in the area, who's the best and the brightest that you can work with. When we came to Vietnam, for the most part, it was the Montagnards, particularly in the Central Highlands. They were the king of the walk. They owned the place because they knew it so well. It was their world. Just as when we went in and worked with people from the Northern Alliance, when we went into Peru and worked with folks there trying to counter the Sendero Luminoso, when we went into Central America and worked with people there and tried to support some of the anti-narcotics activities that went on. We learned who the locals were that knew the area, that knew the folks, and we went to work with them. And it's all about moving in and being partners with whoever you're working with, as opposed to moving in and taking over their society or being subservient to them. It's an equal partnership on equal footing, and it's a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding that we each have our own strengths, we each have our own weaknesses, and we will work together to make sure that we can get that job done. And that's what Special Forces is all about to me. You can see that THUOT is a city that sits in a bowl inside the mountains of the Central Highlands of Vietnam. And it was chosen initially by the French colonists because it was a cool area, literally, temperature-wise, for them to have summer homes in when it got so hot down on the delta or the plains of Vietnam. It's a gorgeous area. A lot of people look at it and say it looks almost European. Well, that probably comes from a lot of the French and perhaps German architecture that has been used throughout this area. It's a beautiful city. It's very comfortable. It's 10 o'clock in the morning now. short sleeve weather in April when it's starting to get pretty warm around the rest of Vietnam and pretty humid. It's very comfortable here. Well, I was on an airplane flying from, or a helicopter flying from Nha Trang to Ban Me Thuot. I don't even remember what I went for, probably finance, because that was about the only thing I ever went to Nha Trang, the 5th Special Forces Group headquarters. And they had a red light come on, a warning light or whatever. And so they landed at the airfield here. And there was about, I think there was 5 of us that were just passengers on board the airplane. And so we jumped the wire at the airfield. Because again, there was a small contingent of Air Force and Army air controllers and guys that kind of ran the airfield here. And then there was some military police, but there were no actual combat units stationed anywhere near THUOT. And so we jumped the wire and we came downtown because it seemed like a good idea to find some beer and maybe some girls to talk to. And that sounded like a fine idea to us. And so we came downtown and we found some beer and we found some girls to talk to. And that's where the MPs found us. And so they politely arrested us and took us back out to the airfield and turned us back into the airfield and said, okay, you know, go back to bed, guys. Well, we weren't through yet. We needed more beer and we needed more girls. So we found a different place to jump the wire and we came back downtown. And we found the beer and we found the girls and the MPs found us again. And so they arrested us for the second time. And they were a little more irate this time. It was like, you assholes need to go back there and just stay because the status of forces agreement, the SAPA, only allows X number of military personnel in this town at any one time. And we're full up because all the colonels and their horse holders are here. And so you can't be. Well, that didn't set too well. So we found a laundry truck that was taking laundry out of the camp. And we got in the laundry truck and concealed ourselves inside the laundry and came back downtown. And this time when the MPs found us, they were just downright impolite. They arrested us, put handcuffs on us, which they hadn't done the previous 2 times. Took us back to the airfield and gave us the edict that if they caught us one more time in downtown THUOT, they were going to give us to the Vietnamese and let us spend the night and probably the next several weeks in a Vietnamese jail. That probably got our attention pretty well, and so we decided we'd just spend the night. So we did, and got up the next morning, and miraculously the helicopter had been repaired. Probably the pilot fixed a little switch that he flipped so he could park here for the night, and we flew on to Ban Me Thuot and went back to business as normal. You know, you tend to remember the fun and the happy times and put the bad times out of your mind. That's just a human trait, psychological trait. But it's so great to be back here now to see how far it's come. That's what's amazing to me, to see how far this whole country has come. Of all the boots that I've ever owned, I'd have to give these the 5-star rating. They're comfortable, they're lightweight, they're versatile, and you can drink in them.
God, I love you. God, I love you. We're here in the highlands of northern Vietnam. We have our final sample of the GORUCK footwear. So picked them up, and the important thing is that you confirm tests, you confirm prototypes. So this isn't just something that we tried on in the conference room and then we said, yeah, they're good. We've put a lot of miles on earlier versions, but we also made some tweaks and some changes along the way. So it's important to confirm that those changes are good, and we're up here in the highlands of northern Vietnam to do that.
So we're in the middle of our RUCK in North Vietnam, and we only have one more target bearer, so we have to beeline back home soon. No, we've been out, what, on just over 10 hours now or so?
A lot of up,
Yeah.
a lot of down,
Yeah.
a lot of around, a lot of mud, a lot of dirt.
A lot of mud and dirt. This is not our first go around in these boots, but this is the latest boot version that we got about 48 hours ago in Ho Chi Minh City in Saigon at our factory, right? 9 or 10 or 11 hours into this thing, and we got another 2 or 3, right, to get home. First impressions, Rich?
They're light, they're slick, and they're functional.
They just work. Want to see the entrance or no?
Sure. We're in front of the Hanoi Hilton, which was a French prison built to hold Vietnamese. And then during the war, after the French had left, during the American War with Vietnam, it was turned into, again, a prison. And our guys dubbed it the Hanoi Hilton. Sometimes they thought that was a positive thing. Our guys were simply being sarcastic, and more power to them for that and for all they did to resist what was done here. Feeling pretty humbled and very emotional, thinking of what went on behind those walls and what the guys suffered through that were held there, the years of captivity. I truly wish there was something that we could have done to alleviate that. And there was talk and planning and all kinds of stuff that went on, but there was just no way to do it. It was too hard a nut to crack. Probably one of the toughest things I can imagine. Will I volunteered to do it? Hell yes. But it was just too hard to do. The distances of flying in, because you'd have to come in by aircraft in some way, where to land, how to get on the ground, how to get up to the wall, how to get over the wall, or to go inside from the very start. And there was lots of defensive mechanisms around the prison, from anti-aircraft to anti-personnel. And so there was no way that you could do something like that. And those guys had to come home in their own good time, but come home they did. The majority of them. Some of them never came home. And to all who did or didn't, my hat's off to them. Very emotional. Here's to all of them.
Oh. Did you know anyone personally that ended up here?
Yep.
Who?
An SF medic, Jimmy Jackson. And they put him through some shit. Seriously. Good guy. He was an 18 Delta, or at the time, it wasn't an 18 Delta then, it was a 91 whatever. Special Forces qualified, and he did. And he met Jane Fonda. And every time Jane Fonda came to Fayetteville, they went and locked Jimmy up. With everything that's gone on here, it's amazing that now, with all the dark things that happen here, they got a ticket booth and they're selling tickets so you can go inside and look at it. Frickin' tickets. That was pretty cool. I mean, here's a family, Vietnamese family from Hanoi that just came up at the same time we did, and they're doing the same thing we are. They're sightseeing and being tourists. And it just goes to show you that people go together. They brought their kid along who had this great T-shirt on that said, if I was a bird, I know who I'd shit on.
What does it say?
Hey, Richard.
If I was...
Richard, can you stand in there for a second?
If, look at this, If I was a bird, I know who I'd shit on.
Hey. They want to take a picture.
Yeah.
And Mom and the kid got in, and then Dad got in, and I mean, it was a surreal moment, but it was so cool. It was the meeting of two different cultures that at one time had been mortal enemies, and now we're here on the planet sharing it together. That's cool. That is damn cool. Any time in life that you do something, you tend to forget the bad and remember the good. I remembered the good. I wasn't sure I wanted to remember the bad. For a long time, I'd talked to a bunch of my peers in the SF community that had made the trip back to Vietnam, that wanted to go back and see what it was like for whatever reasons. Everybody has a personal reason that they want to do it. I never found a reason, because I've always had this whole thing in my mind when I have a traumatic situation that I've got a box I put it in my head that I just put it away. And I decided that it was probably time to take some of those back out. And so I said yes to going back to Vietnam. Surprisingly to me, it provided closure to a circle that I didn't know was open. It was an interesting experience. It was a cathartic experience. It was an experience that closed that loop for me that had been open because I chose not to close it before. I didn't know that I needed to do that. I've been back to Vietnam. I would recommend that anyone who has ever been there in a combat role, go back and look at it. Don't be afraid of your past. Address it and deal with it. Make your experience count.